Different perspectives.
That's great. Please take the center of the stage.
Thank you.
Did you get the rules with the ring, the bell, and the
yes,
gun?
Yes,
Yeah,
I'm pretty afraid that you will shoot me up. But
I
will hurry up. I hope I don't speak too fast. So, hi everyone. As far as I understand, there's a difference what cities can do and what the national level can do. And from the former presentations I heard, I want to touch upon what the city of Berlin can do. But when it comes to speed limits, it's not an either or. It's what all has to be done. But for us in Germany, that has to be regulated on the national level, while the cities can start and do things. I want to have this a little bit more interactive, so I hope you're all not asleep, so let's wake up a little bit. If you look at this road, would you let your child cycle on this path? Hands up if you would do it. An 8-year-old child. Okay, I see some people doing it. If this would be a real picture, your child would be dead, because it's an intersection where the bicycle path is divided and the lorries can drive over this path. And in this particular moment, if the car would drive over, your child would be dead. Would you let your child cycle here? Who would let your child? Hands up. Okay, so I see a couple of more. This is from the famous pop-up bike lanes that got put up in Berlin in the pandemic. At the moment, we have 51 kilometers of pop-up bicycle lanes. They are 2 meters wide, and they have a separation to cars. And I know some of my previous speakers said it's okay if you want to drive together all in one road. I'm a little bit skeptical to this, because if you want to have the perspective of your 8-year-old child driving by itself, I am pretty sure it needs a protection and it needs a consistent path to cycle by itself. And that's all I want. I don't want anything less. Who of you would let your child cycle here? Okay. Maybe a lot of people are asleep, but I think everyone should feel safe to have a child cycle here, because it is a road where no cars are allowed anymore, where a road that it's used for recreational sense, for walking and for cycling. And in German we call this Spielstraße, which means as much as play street. And it's opening the street for people, and it's closing the street for cars. I will touch upon this, this communication point later on. And in Berlin, we have 18 of these play streets. And when it comes to the European Mobility Week, we have 30 pop-up Spielstraße. Okay, let's have a closer look. I mean, I have to say I'm a cyclist, so I will talk a lot about the cycling perspective, but I will also bring up other issues. Who is already cycling? It's according to Roger Geller that there are 4 types of cycling, and we have to keep this in mind when we want to know for whom are we building the infrastructure. Let's start with the bottom. On the bottom left, you have the courier drivers, you know, the fearless ones. They drive, it doesn't matter if there's like holes on the street, they will drive anyway. So you don't have to build any infrastructure for them. On the bottom right, you have the car drivers. They would never, ever consider another mode of transport. You simply cannot reach them. So just ignore them. Let's go to the top. On the right, you have, on the top right, you have the convinced. They cycle due to environmental reasons, to health reasons, economic reasons, whatsoever. So they will drive. And on the top left, you have the major and most important group. It's the 60%, and most of them don't even cycle because they're concerned. They don't feel safe enough. Let's have a closer look at the 60%, because for those, we have to build the infrastructure. Not for those who are already cycling or walking. We have to build the infrastructures for those who are not cycling yet. There's a study from the Munich University who looks at these 60%. And when you divide the 60% again, of course you also have people you don't reach. But the vast majority you can easily convince by one measure: safe infrastructure. If the infrastructure is safe, consistent, separated, they will come and they will cycle. That's what they do in the Netherlands, that's what they do in Denmark. And of course, you have weather, you have other issues, and you have a social image. So in countries like Italy and Germany, and I mean, I'm from the car-loved country in the world, we have gasoline in our blood. So it's very difficult for us to imagine another system, and I guess it's similar in Italy, and we have to change our mindset in this. Okay, let's have a look at infrastructure is the most important baseline. It has to be consistent, it has to be separated, it has to be widespread. But besides that, and I don't want to go into safety numbers because all of my previous speakers have talked a lot about it, we just have to be, whenever there are more cyclists, there's less people dying or being affected when they cycle or die in traffic. And it has to be also a communication sense. It has to be communicated as a mode of transport. Cycling and walking is a mode of transport. It's not only for recreational sense, but it's something that you do for work, and you do it, and that's maybe important. In Denmark, they cycle because it's the most convenient mode of transport. And we don't have to convince them to do anything else. It's environmental, and it has to be safe, and then they do it, and we have to communicate about it. Let's look a little bit at Berlin. So I'm bringing in a little bit Berlin numbers. We have fewer deaths. But as we saw from two speakers before me, everyone who dies on the road is a person too much. So we need a vision zero where nobody dies, because for one person dying, 150 people are affected. Family, friends, colleagues, so on and so forth. So we have to really work towards a vision that safe infrastructure, that nobody's dying on the road again. And when I look at the numbers in Germany, we have about 500 cyclists who die a year, and we have about, and most, 2/3 of them are over 60. So it's mainly affecting the elderly people who are dying as pedestrians and as cyclists. So we have to really make sure that they're included in our safety measures and in the way we want our cities to be built. I have to say, I arrived yesterday in Milan and I was shocked. So everywhere's cars, and I thought it's like bicycle racks, but you have these things on the sidewalks so people don't park on it. And I brought this very funny picture from Berlin. I don't know, it's a bobby car. Maybe your children also have bobby cars. It's also another way of implementing car-centric thinking in our children's minds, because they already start playing with cars when they can't even walk. And this is a bobby car at the space of an SUV parked into the road. And whenever it comes to safety, we also want to make sure that our vehicles are parked safely. But where do we park our bikes? That's like an active measure. But we also have to definitely restrict where to park our cars. And I think it was said earlier that it's only €8 for 8 hours for parking in Rome, but it's 86 in London. So we really have to also use push measures, not only pull measures, but definitely push measures. And because with all these road safety is always very sad numbers, so maybe a fun fact about the stress level, because that's also very much connected to security. If you drive a car in London at rush hour, you have the same stress level as a fight pilot while fighting. So that's the stress level you're under while driving a car and looking for a parking spot. And that, of course, affects the stress we put on the road. Okay, let me use the last minutes to tell you a little bit about what we did in Berlin. In Berlin, there was a strong bottom-up movement to advocate for those who are not cycling yet. It started in 2016, and in 2018, we have a mobility law. The first mobility law in Germany got implemented by the city of Berlin. What they can do, they can build infrastructure for cyclists, and maybe one important thing to say, they shifted the mind. So they are starting with the pedestrians as the major source, then the cyclists, then public transport, and then the car. So they shifted the paradigm, and they make sure that the pedestrians and the cyclists are the vulnerable groups, are the most safe and valued groups. And what's interesting is they did it, and they try to do everything what they can do on a city level. But of course, we also have to introduce a speed limit, but that's done on the national level. And what I wanted to give to you is that they had in mind that it's the most vulnerable groups that need to be protected. And maybe to also give you an idea about the difference between subjective and objective safety feeling, when I draw a line here with dots and I say, it's a safe line, it's in the rules, and only if it's like half a meter wide, this is a safe space to walk. And I don't feel safe, I bring a wheelchair, I bring a stroller, and I don't want to walk there, I don't walk there. I don't cycle there. And this is my subjective feeling of whether I feel safe or not. And this is something that we have to consider while building infrastructure. And otherwise, people won't use it. You can build nice infrastructure. If it's not intuitive and if it's not to your subjective safety, you won't use it. And maybe to go again, and in the morning it was mentioned the movement from the Netherlands, Stop the Kindermoord. And we in Germany try to have a more positive movement at the moment. It's called critical mass. It's from the critical mass, so from the people cycling once a month, taking up the road and showing that we're many. It's about the children and about empowering children to go on their own way, to cycle, and to make sure that they can roam around freely. Because if you once think, yeah, I will hurry up. If you once think that playgrounds got only invented to keep children away from the streets. They used to play on the streets, now they play on the playgrounds. I have to hurry up a little bit. I maybe skip this because you don't have so much snow probably here. But it's also interesting that when it snows, it's the pedestrians and the cyclists who are most affected, but we clear the roads first. Please consider also, if you want to take people out of cars, it needs to be a safe environment. It needs to be a lot of light. If you don't feel safe, and 1 out of 3 women don't feel safe in public space at night. And I said that I do a lot for women, so maybe I skip over this women part a little bit, but just consider when there's more women cycling than men, you have a safe infrastructure. If you don't have more women cycling, you don't have a safe infrastructure, because they are less risk averse. And last but not least, it's an issue of leadership and diverse representations. I put on, Brussels was mentioned before, we have Helsinki, we have Berlin. It's a lot of women who push this forward. I just want this to be mentioned, and I want to make sure that we have to have a diverse representation, not only of women, but of elderly people, of children, of women of color, with different needs in public space to be considered. I'm hurrying up. Just give me 1 sec, because I have 3 important to-dos to give to you. First thing is, make sure it's a safe and consistent infrastructure, and keep always in mind, would I let my own child cycle here or walk here to school by himself or herself? If it's not the case, it's not safe infrastructure. And also consider that you need pull measures and push measures, so you also have to push the cars out. Second is the cultural shift. Get the gasoline out of your blood. That's all I'm saying. And last but not least, it's the use of language. We're opening the streets, and we're closing it for cars. And this is the picture we had before. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you. Dankeschön. Dankeschön, Isabelle. Thank you.